no matter if you work on it or not, you're going to have a culture. There is a culture at every company. The question is it the culture you want? And is it the culture that allows your team to be about the mission and the purpose for which you designed your business? That's the question.
Welcome to the 1110 Leadership Podcast, where we tackle issues at the intersection of leadership, faith, and culture. I'm your host, Rob Shields, Vice President of Strategy in 1110 Leadership, and I'm joined by my co-host, founder and CEO of 1110 Leadership, David Spickard. Proverbs 11:10 lays out a bold and countercultural vision. When the righteous prosper, the city rejoices. We're here to ask, what does it look like practically to be this type of leader? Leaders willing to invest everything they have so that everyone around them can thrive. Join us on the journey as we lean in, listen, and learn how to become Proverbs 11:10 kind of leaders. The kind of leaders that make our cities rejoice. David.
Yes, Rob.
How are you doing? Good to see you.
I'm good. Good to see you. You have a fresh cut this year.
I do.
Fresh year. We've remarked on that yet.
Fresh cut.
Fun to see fresh cut Rob.
That's right.
I don't know how long it'll last. I know you like to grow out your beard.
I do. It's a little shorter now. I kind of am regretting it being this length. It feels like I should have done that in the summer, and then started out for warmth in the winter.
Cold?
It's cold. Yeah, my face is more cold now. I need my go-to candle. I need to hold it closer to my cheeks for warmth.
How did your kids react?
It wasn't shocking. There have been times in the past where it was just a trim. I didn't go all the way down to bare skin. And when they were little and like babies, they would cry when I would do that because of how rare. And they were like, they don't recognize this person. My dad's face looks so different. So how are you on this? Are we calling it Super Bowl Eve? We're not quite there yet, but it's coming really soon. And I know you're a big sports guy.
We've talked about that. Yes,
we have. It's a high priority event on your calendar, right?
I don't know that I've ever not watched a Super Bowl. Have you ever not watched the Super Bowl?
Remember one that you've missed? That's impressive.
Do you ever? You have one? I don't know.
I don't think so.
It's kind of a holiday, and whether you like sports or not, it's a fun event with people. So, yeah, looking forward to it.
Do you have any fun Super Bowl traditions? Things that you always do?
No. We're into the commercials, of course. It's the whole thing. So,
but you, all the chefs in your family, there's no staple signature dish.
No, we usually, we might do some things like wings that are traditional for Super Bowl or chili or, I don't know, some, Doritos. No.
Something fancy, like a bag of Cool Ranch Doritos.
But no, it's kind of how we're feeling in that particular year.
I like it. Well, we've hit the note on the theme of rest over the holidays quite a bit, and so it seems like you're just leaning into receiving on that holiday, and just say you don't always have to bake all the things. You can just show up and open up the bag of Doritos and enjoy yourself. That's great. Well, I'm really excited to dive into today's topic. We've been laying out the kind of the framework for 2025 and some themes that we really think are really vital for leaders to have on top of their radar. And today we're going to spend some time unpacking some research that has emerged from Gallup. We think very highly of those folks and I think help to identify some kind of key trends in leadership writ large. And they've identified 7 workplace challenges for leaders to be thinking about heading into this year. And so we're looking forward to just really unpacking those with you, David. None of them are going to really be out of left field, but they hit on themes around engagement, culture. What does it look like to really serve your people well? How are we connecting them to mission? And how do we even adapt to building a team in this environment as this hybrid world is really settled in? Feels like the die is kind of cast on there really is this new way to work. And we've talked about that in the past, but that's still a thing. And leaders still need to have it on their radar of what are the best practices that really harness the potential of our teams in this new hybrid world we live in, where we've got remote work balance within office, all of the things. So I'm excited. This almost feels, I know we've already kind of done a New Year's resolution podcast and we're already late in the January, but it still feels resolution-y of like, hey, these are some themes you got to have on your radar for this year. So I'm excited about today's conversation.
Yeah, we really appreciate all the work that Gallup does because they get after really the core things that we see in the work that we do with leaders that put language and stats and insights. And usually there's a little bit of an extra nugget in there that helps us understand even more deeply what's going on. So I'm looking forward to talking through those.
Yeah. So David, let's just dive straight in. Which of the workplace challenges, as you read that research, jumped off the page to you?
Well, we're going to talk about a lot of them today that hit me. One is just this idea they call a great detachment that is threatening performance. They've coined this term detachment. It comes out of COVID. We heard about the great resignation where people were leaving their work. But this idea of detachment, they're seeing that people are staying in their jobs, but they're staying in their jobs in a place of indifference because the job market is such that they don't see opportunities outside of their work. They would love to leave their jobs to move on to something else that they feel like is more productive or allows them to thrive, but they're not finding that. So they're staying in their jobs. And as a result, it looks like companies have good retention. Companies love retention stats to see how many people are staying at their business, but those can be misleading because a lot of those people who have stayed are indifferent. They're just going through the motions. They don't want to be there, and they're not talking about it. So that's one that really stuck out to me. Another one was recognition, just how important recognition is. They talk about how it's the major blind spot for leaders, how not giving regular, even weekly feedback and recognition is really hurting morale. And then, like you just mentioned, the hybrid piece. We'll talk about this a little bit more in just a minute, but just how proactive leaders have to be around the hybrid work expectations that employees have now. And we find in the work that we've done that many of our employers, because it's so new and they're reacting to employees' expectations, they are doing just that. They're reacting versus having really thought out plans that are proactive and communicated well. So those are 3 of the 7, or maybe 4 of the 7. I think they combine a couple of ones that I just described that are ones that stand out to me.
Yeah, I mean, the stats around that phrase, I love that. I mean, I don't love the phrase because it's a negative. The great detachment, it really is a sticky term to describe what's happening. And the stats they use to back it up are pretty staggering. Their Gallup reports the employee engagement has reached an 11-year low. So, I mean, think about that. That's even taking out COVID. I mean, people can often blame COVID for a lot of, well, yeah, since 2020, the whole world's different. But, 11 years is going back a lot further than that. Overall employee satisfaction is at an all-time low. And like you said, because of the job market, the quit rate isn't increasing. So it's kind of this perfect storm that's brewing where you've got workers who are sticking with their organizations, but they're feeling more disconnected than ever from the organization's mission. And they're also really feeling a sense that their organization just doesn't care about them. So with that in mind, David, knowing that that is the backdrop of leadership heading into 2025, what are some practical strategies that leaders can employ to really work on re-engaging those employees who are a part of that great detachment and really fostering a greater sense of purpose and belonging?
Well, I think leaders need not to be scared to have the conversation with their employees about how they're doing and to create a space where those employees feel like they can actually share honestly about how they're doing. Again, when we're doing work in the companies that we're engaging with, there's just an underlying sort of vibe or culture or feeling that you get among employees where you can tell whether they're willing to talk about how things are going or not. And that's directly tied to the environment that an employer is creating for them to feel like they can have these conversations and that it's important. It's a balance when you're trying to get things done in a company and not always just talk about people's feelings. you know, we can get so bogged down by people's feelings and also feel like we're opening a can of worms by trying to accommodate our employees and their expectations. And sometimes those expectations are unrealistic or they're not aligned with where the company needs to be or what the company needs to accomplish. So it takes a lot of savvy for employers, leaders to know how to create an environment where they can have these honest conversations, but ensure that they're still on point, that they're still meeting their goals, that they're challenging their employees, that they're creating opportunities for them to grow. And then I think, along with that, there's this sense that, and you mentioned this, people don't feel like their leaders care about them. I mean, it's just simple, attention and care and trying to see their work as a place where they're developing people, not just trying to get things done. We've talked about this a ton on our podcast. How do you see your organization as a leadership development organization, not a home building organization or a financial services organization or fill in the blank, whatever your industry is. And we see that when leaders make that shift, they understand that this is a means through which they're investing in people, creating opportunities for them to live whole lives and develop them as leaders. Everything changes. They become the employer that people want to work for. So when you see a great detachment, it's people at those other companies want to come work for us. And that's where you want to be as a leader and an employer, the place where everybody wants to work.
Yeah. The word coach comes to mind. I've got an actual whistle here on my desk because I think in our work, it's just
right next to your candle.
Yeah, it is. It is not, and it's a cool, just a little metaphor of like, hey, this is what the work that we get to do. When you boil it down, we're coaches, but really, part of our coaching is to help leaders see themselves as coaches.
For sure.
And really making that shift to saying, hey, when you're a coach, you got to understand what your team needs, both collectively and individually, and you've got to coach and adapt to their needs. And like you said, it's a fine line. You don't want to overcorrect or undercorrect around this. You don't want to be blown and tossed by the wind of expectations. And yet you also don't want to completely disregard those expectations and say, we're never going to create any space to talk about who you are and creating value other than what you produce, because people don't want to work for companies where they just feel like they're a cog in the wheel and they're feeling dehumanized, right? That's going to affect their performance. So that's kind of that catch-22 of if you're so concerned about performance that you don't humanize your team, then ultimately that actually backfires against performance.
The other finding that Gallup has in this article, which makes this even more complicated or challenging for leaders, is the stat where life evaluation, U.S. employee life evaluation, is at an all-time low. So the least amount of people ever, according to Gallup's study, are thriving in their overall lives.
Half aren't.
Yeah, half aren't thriving. So 50% are thriving, 50% aren't. And, this is not just not thriving at work. This is not thriving in life.
Yeah.
And again, this is sort of the new world. I don't know if it's new that we live in, but it's become more palpable. This idea that we're not whole, we're finding that people are dealing with issues all over their lives and bringing them into the workplace. And now they are on the plates of leaders to have to deal with. So whether it has to do with health, physical health, mental health, dealing with divisions that we experience or what's going on in the world that people are reacting to, or what's going on in their families and their family lives, relationships, even, self-medicating and things like that that people are turning to just get through a day.
Mm.
It's just, it's like, and we dealt with this a lot at Jobs for Life, because a lot of the people who are going through Jobs for Life classes had real challenges that they were facing. And so business leaders who were then hiring them recognizes that there was a measure of social work that had to be done in the business environment to provide supportive services for their employees to be good employees. And I think now that's become more pervasive no matter who you are, whether you're someone who would go through a JFL class or you're just anyone. There's more social need within individuals now across the US that companies are now having to deal with a lot of those social concerns at the workplace, which has made things challenging.
Tricky.
I mean,
Yeah.
you think about what kind of investments we need to make. Do we offer childcare for our workers? Because that's a huge issue. What about transportation? What about mental health services? What do our benefits look like? How much vacation do we offer? And do you get sick days? All the things that we think can make our employees soft, over time.
Or be distractions, distractions from the work.
And again, we're trying to placate expectations of employees by what we offer. And it's gotten really challenging to know that balance. What do we say hard and fast we've got to do in order to be productive? But how do we also recognize the deep social needs of our employee base?
Which ultimately drills back down to how do you define success? And is it expansive enough that people can be whole at your company, right? And you can't solve all their problems outside of work. That's not what we're saying. But you can be an agent of wholeness where when they show up to work, they feel seen, they feel valued, and you're allowing them to be the full expression of themselves in ways that are appropriate and channeling and harnessing their strengths. And watch what happens when that productivity gets unleashed, when someone feels like you're in their corner, coaching them to be the very best that they could be. And they're also just seen as human, which I feel like we've said that word a lot. I think Gallup also identified the most significant blind spots that they found that leaders have, which is fascinating. We talk about blind spots a lot in our work, David, which is why we think it's so important when we do our Thrive assessments for leaders that they be 360, right? It's not just a leader evaluating, here's how I think I'm doing, but here's how my team is thriving under my leadership, because that really paints the full picture, right? We talk about being holistic. So I found this fascinating because it builds on exactly what you're saying, that two of the biggest blind spots for leaders were around the theme of communication. And we've tackled this before. We've talked about the ways to be a super communicator, right, in previous episodes, and that's really important, and it's still really important. So specifically, the two themes under communication were around the amount of feedback and recognition that leaders provide their teams. So Gallup found that there was a significant gap. This is fascinating, between the amount of feedback and recognition a leader thinks they provide their team with the amount that the team says they actually do. So leaders, recognition for good work, leaders scored themselves at a 59, and their team scored their leader at a 35. So pretty significant drop off between does my leader recognize good work amongst the team, and then whether or not the leader provides weekly feedback. Leaders scored a 50, and then their team scored them at a 20. So similar drop off, which is pretty significant, right? We're not talking about splitting hairs here. We're talking about, wow, the leader is not seeing their communication skills the same way or frequency of which they're giving feedback to their teams. It's a pretty deep drop off. So, David, what role do you see communication playing in tackling this great detachment? And how can leaders really improve their messaging to their teams to ensure they're feeling heard and valued?
Well, it takes intentional communication, and those stats are very good because I think it gives the formula for what the solution is, and that is, how do I weekly give feedback and recognition to every person that I lead? I mean, that's the question that every leader needs to ask him or herself. And certainly, the other piece of that is finding good work that our employees are doing. Sometimes it's hard to see that they're doing good work, and we feel like if we give them too much credit for work where they're not really hitting the mark, we are hesitant to give them good feedback. But we need to find that good work and affirm them in the places where they're doing well. That doesn't mean that we avoid the constructive criticism. In fact, we need to do that very clearly and to make sure they understand where they stand. But it's intentional communication that starts where it feels like I'm just checking a box because I need to make sure that I've connected with Rob this weekly, and I'll check the box once I have, and hopefully he received it so that he would check the box too when he's evaluated whether I gave him good feedback and recognition. But over time, then it should become normal. It shouldn't be something that I have to check off. It's just the way I operate as a leader, so that naturally I'm giving feedback and recognition, affirmation, and also just helping people to know where they stand on a regular basis. A lot of people think that this is what you do at your annual review or your 6-month review, and you just pile it all in that 1 hour, 45-minute or hour and a half meeting, and that's where we give feedback. And of course, that's not what needs to happen. So that intentionality then becomes organic and natural. And, I think, again, it goes back to conversations where we're really asking people what they need and are they hearing from us? We can even assess whether we're doing well by asking them if we're doing well in this area instead of waiting for them to take a survey to tell us whether we're doing this or not.
Hey, business leaders, are you and your team truly thriving? The Thrive Assessment from 1110 Leadership is designed to help you find out. This powerful 360 tool uncovers key leadership opportunities and challenges to help foster growth and help you build a thriving workplace culture. With insights into trust, health, relationships, impact, value, and engagement, you'll gain a clear understanding of where you stand and how to improve. But what sets the Thrive Assessment apart is the relational process. It's so much more than just an online survey. Our team walks with you through the results, providing support and coaching to help you and your team thrive together. Ready to take your leadership to the next level? Visit 1110leadership.com to learn more and start thriving today.
Yeah, and I think specifically around feedback and recognition, like you said, they pair well together, ideally. And also the type of feedback and recognition you're giving needs to be specific, both in the negative and in the positive. And we've talked about that, I think, on previous episodes, of this idea that don't give general positive and specific negative. That's how our leaders usually fall guilty to. Of, hey, you're doing great in general, but that email that you sent needed to be changed in these 17 ways. Like, ooh, okay, what are people going to walk away remembering? I'm not saying you shouldn't say the 17 ways, but you also need to be just as specific in the positive feedback that you're giving, because you're a great human, just doesn't stick with people. Like, hey, when you did this specific action, or you did this, you really modeled our values in ways that I just want to affirm, and I just so grateful that you're on the team because of this action you performed. So I think also the idea of feedback and recognition is staying so relevant because of where we're going next with this conversation, of the idea of how to navigate the challenges of hybrid work. Because the reality is, there's a lot more remote-based work happening through things like Zoom and all these softwares that have been created out of the pandemic that allow us to easily. I was talking with a leader the other day that was saying, I realized I can go work really from anywhere sometimes, and so I'm going to try to go do that. And while that's a benefit, some of the negatives for leaders is you don't get the water cooler affirmations anymore. Yeah. So if you're not having these regular cadences, like you're saying, then you may go a while where you have no contact with your team, and that's gonna really reinforce this detached feeling, because there's just not as much face time. So we have to be really intentional with the face time that we have. So that was where Gallup also identified this idea of of another workplace challenge of how to collaborate effectively with a hybrid team. And David, I think you and I both agree this is particularly relevant to the leaders that we work with and their teams. And there can be real tension here when there's different philosophies of thought around how much people should or should not be in the office and leaning into remote work. They found that the strongest teams are led by leaders who create a meaningful value proposition that draws people into the office and maximizes their time there with collaboration and team building activities. They also found that the best teams, this is really cool, formed a team charter collectively. Like the leader didn't just tell them, here's what the charter is, but they collectively came together and made a team charter that defines how team members best work together. And they evaluate that on a regular basis and adapt based on what's working and what isn't. So, David, can you speak to that in your experience working with leaders who have tried to make this shift, who have or have not kind of wrestled with how to embrace the hybrid nature that many industries now are facing? Yeah, we'd just love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. So, listening to what you just described, this is a place where being very intentional, like we've already just talked about, and proactive is critical. And that last piece that you just said, where they define this together, I don't know that we've seen much of that happening in the work that we've done. It's usually a top-down decision as to what the remote hybrid policy is going to be.
Yeah, what leaders expect of their teams.
Yeah, so it's fascinating to think about this as a collective effort, collective decision, solving the problem together and creating an agreement and a charter so that there's no question. That's really helpful.
And that the team actually, talk about carrot or stick, like it's so winsome because they'll actually want to sustain it because they help build it.
Yeah. I mean, again, in our experience, most leaders have just sort of had to, how do I say it, acquiesce to the growing movement of expectation around remote work. We talked about this with Catrice Boyd when we were talking about Generation Z and how, they're looking for jobs that offer hybrid and remote work often because that's just their expectation. And, when things aren't clear, man, it gets messy. Like, they talk about the companies that put together a plan where there's regular check-in meetings, there's guidelines for when people are available, both in person and online during work hours. So it's very clear when someone is available and when they're not, when they're on site in person, when they're at home. So it's very important that it is as specific as possible and not just acquiescing to what people need. It has to fit the goals of the organization. It's, the cool thing I think about hybrid, which most people would say, is that I can be more productive when I'm, working in a certain environment where I'm not in the office. I mean, everybody says that, right?
Yeah. Like why go? Why waste the time driving in when I can just honestly just crank out a lot more work from home?
Yeah. And so we shouldn't be scared of that, right? And we should figure out, yes, that's part of it. But yes, the collaboration, the in-person for those companies where it makes sense, the need for, creativity and ideas, all the things that come with being face-to-face, the opportunity to be known. And, every company is different. I mean, there are going to be some that are fully remote now, which was unheard of back in the day. Like, this is the kind of work that you do. And other companies, like, you're in the office every day. This is just the work that we do. Remote just doesn't make sense. And so each have to deal with, the challenges of both approaches. But then when that hybrid, dynamic is established, it has to be clear. It has to be specific. And man, it'd be great if everyone came up with it and therefore everyone agreed to it.
Yeah. That clarity can be a game changer. And so I think that's really fascinating to think about. David, we're gonna end where maybe Simon Sinek says start with why. We're gonna end with why. Although I think we've been talking about why this whole time.
Mm-hmm.
That's always the theme of the work that we do. We're gonna land the plane here talking about culture a bit more on the nose. And the stat that's pretty striking: Gallup found that when employees strongly agree that they know what their organization stands for and what makes their brand different from competitors, they are 11 times as likely to strongly agree that they feel connected to their organization's culture. That's a fascinating statistic. And culture is really top of mind, they found, with leaders for 2025. Organizational culture, and really realizing we've got to invest in this. This doesn't just form by default. We have to be very proactive to build the type of culture we want and to make sure our teams feel connected to it outside of the specific leader or CEO. So I'd love to just hear your thoughts on that, and how you've seeing that play out, and then how can leaders help their employees, again, back to this great detachment, that feel disconnected from the organization's mission and values. How can a leader specifically help reconnect them to the why of the company?
That's how we're going to end. That's like a whole episode.
As a preview to our whole next episode. Yeah, sorry. We that's a big one. It's just laying and waiting for us.
So 11 times. That's a pretty big number.
11 times. That's huge. It's actually 11.3 times, but I rounded down. So it's even more than 11. It's even a bigger problem than we thought.
Well, so, we could talk about this for a long time. This is the work that we do. We have a high value around culture. It's often overlooked. Every leader wants their company to have a culture that is thriving. Who doesn't, right? But not every leader understands they have to work at it just as much as they work on their business and their product and their service. That's the problem.
Yeah.
And no matter if you work on it or not, you're going to have a culture. There is a culture at every company. The question is it the culture you want? And is it the culture that allows your team to be about the mission and the purpose for which you designed your business? That's the question. And we find leaders don't have that, that feeling about culture near as high as they should, and therefore don't spend as much time on it, don't think about it as much, don't do the proactive steps to take to make sure the kind of culture that they want is central to who they are and what they're about. So to answer your second question, how do you help detached people get connected? Culture is spend time on your culture. Create space for you to talk about it, to look at your mission, your vision and values. Are they right? Do we need to update them? How are we talking about them amongst our people? How are we living them out? And how are they more visible? What does it look like for us to think about this not only internally, but also externally? What kind of ways are we engaging our customers and our stakeholders around the things that we value? And are we measuring it? Do we have measurements and ways in which we're evaluating ourselves around our culture to ensure that it is truly what we want it to be? Are we willing to be evaluated as leaders, by our people around issues related to culture? So, it's for us, this is our jam, right? And, for us, we know that when you get this right, then everything around products and services and goals and all the things that you want to do flow from this. But a lot of times leaders just see this as a side thing or distraction and, not nearly as core as it has to be. So it's a decision that leaders need to make. And, because it's hard to measure maybe, or it feels sort of feeling oriented versus tangible measurement outcomes, dollars and cents, or, numbers, or, it can be hard to realize how important it is to the bottom line. But we can guarantee you, we've seen the companies we work with, when they pay attention to this, their bottom line skyrockets. Not every time. We have a number of examples of companies that we work with over the years whose revenues just went way up. Their ability to grow, to do the things, it's not a guarantee, but we certainly have seen the correlation between their attention to this and the ways that they have been successful in the normal measurements of business through the work of culture.
Okay, David, please forgive me. I'm going to ask one more question. I know that was a doozy. That was awesome, though. Consolidate all of that down into a bottom line, my friend. If you're going to leave our folks, our listeners, with a single thought, word of advice, piece of encouragement for the road, for the journey as they go back into their leadership worlds today, what are you leaving them with?
Well, there are a lot of challenges ahead for us in the workplace as leaders. We've covered some of them from this Gallup study. And just building off of what we just described around culture and people connecting to this idea of what is it that you stand for in your business. And, for us, there's an ultimate goal too here that's not just internal, like having a successful business with a thriving culture and thriving employees. There's a third part to our theory of change. You go from thriving leaders, thriving employees, and ultimately thriving communities. Like, how are we doing what we're doing in such a way that allows our city to rejoice, our city to thrive? That we care about the places where we work, that we're about restoring things that are not right. And again, if we have people who are coming to us with low life satisfaction, then we have a role in creating places within our communities so that people can thrive in every aspect of their life, and ultimately our communities being places where people are whole. And that's where we want to be about. And that's what we want to connect our people to. And, one of the things that is required of that is that we got to be connected to that personally. We've got to feel that as leaders, that's what we stand for. That's why we're here. It's going to be hard to convey that to the people if we don't believe that ourselves. If we don't take time to really stoke the fire in us about what we're trying to redeem. Right. So, we love the opportunity of working with people who want that and want to go on the journey of trying to figure that out. It's not a one-size-fits-all formula. But when you see the desire for that, and then you know it when you see tastes of it, when you see not just the growing revenue, but the growing depth of connection and purpose and wholeness that people feel that want them to continue to doing the good work.
I love the metaphor of a fire you said, because I think that's so spot on. Like, you've got to have that fire from within, and when it's burning and you can figure out how to articulate it, you watch your team be drawn to that flame, right? Like a moth. And it's contagious. It's infectious in all the good ways. It will ignite your culture. And, even just take some of the smallest steps we talked about today of what's my regular cadence of feedback and recognition? How do I embrace the role of a coach? How am I articulating what our organization stands for? And just being really intentional to invest in culture this year through evaluating how we're doing and empowering my team to speak into those things. Like, just pick one and start building. This is the roadmap, right? It can start with the smallest acts. And so I love that you took it to Cities Rejoicing, because ultimately it has to be greater than us, and it has to be greater than our bottom line. And I love that that's the both sides of this coin of being an 11-10 leader, right? The path to thriving is the path to being just. So love it, David. This is great.
Thanks, Rob.
Awesome. See you next time.
To learn more about 1110 Leadership, visit our website at 1110leadership.com. That's the numerals 11, then spelled out TEN leadership.com. That's 11 TEN leadership.com. There you'll find more resources to equip you on the journey of becoming an 1110 leader. can also get connected to our growing leadership network. If you've enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend. To help others find us, you can also rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts.